Sure. Yeah, so I'm Alex Motil, and from the UbuntuNet Alliance. And yes, like I mentioned, I will be moderating, of course, this event. At UbuntuNet Alliance, the cloud question has increasingly come up, especially in our workshops, but also in our interactions with the members from the entrance. I know we have organized, of course, a few cloud-based events, but particularly for today, I'm quite excited because now we bring a team from AWS that will also provide us with another dimension to actually what we've also been looking at. But I think importantly, how research and education institutions in our region can actually fit in or even benefit from some of the services that AWS is offering. So thank you to AWS for actually allowing, again, from your busy schedules to be a part of this webinar and to present to our community.
Thank you for that. And really, really great. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Professor God, for the opportunity to be here. Like you, we are super, super excited together with my colleagues, as indicated on the introductory slide, to be here on this very first session between ourselves and the Ubuntu Alliance. We look forward to an amazing session. And as you will see on the next slide, we are looking forward to covering the specified agenda, but please feel very free as we go along to note down or just put up any pressing or clarifying questions so that then we'll be able to address them at the Q&A time. I know that's not included on this slide, but it's coming in just after how to buy cloud. So please feel very, very free. As had been mentioned, I lead the public sector business across for AWS across West, East, and Central Africa. And together with my colleagues, it is indeed exciting to be here to introduce AWS, to introduce cloud computing, and also to just take us through the several topics that have been listed here and anything else that does come up between ourselves. So we started from the very top. What really is cloud computing? You know, this is a growing trend, like Alex referred to, and it's growing across not only in Africa, but across the world. And when it comes to cloud computing, we as Amazon Web Services refer to cloud computing essentially as an on-demand delivery of IT services over the internet. And therefore, what this means, instead of individually or as a corporate or organization, buying, owning, and maintaining your own data centers and servers, organizations through cloud computing are able to acquire their technologies such as compute power, storage, databases, and other services through the internet, and depending on their needs. It is almost similar for those of us on the call. It is similar to how customers, for example, flip a switch to turn on the lights in their home and the power company immediately sends electricity. And then when they don't need it, of course, they flip it back off. And this new disruptive era has been a strong disruptor used by companies that are pretty common and popular across the world, such as Airbnb, Netflix, and many other education institutions for the purposes of today's conversation, both education and research, to see and understand the value proposition of such a disruptive change in the IT world. And as we then think about what cloud computing is, one would then obviously wonder, who is AWS? Why does it even make a difference? As we will be seeing on the very next slide. In the traditional consumption model that is pretty prevalent across most parts of the continent that we are on, one had to pay for everything upfront. So whether you're thinking about the hardware, whether you're talking about the services that need to be set up, whether you're thinking about the electricity, everything was essentially paid for upfront. Nothing was what we call on demand. And then there were significant long-term contracts. And as an individual or organization, one had to undergo a long, strenuous planning process to first even determine what you need. For maybe the more technical people in the room, you'll probably remember experiences where you've had to, when you had to maybe buy something like storage, people tend to over budget so that they're safer, because if you're in a budgeting cycle, it was always safer to budget for more rather than under, because you'll probably not get penalized for having more capacity. But when an organization runs out, you're probably going to get into quite a bit of trouble of that. And therefore, organizations went through strenuous processes to determine what they needed. Then they would buy that, and then you'd keep hoping and keeping your fingers crossed that you had planned correctly for that future. And of course, there's a lot of internal back and forth administrative work that happened to get this right. With cloud computing in AWS, things turn around so that then you only turn things on as you need them, and you turn them off when you no longer need them. And therefore, if I look at the difference that AWS brings to, in terms from a cloud computing perspective, there are 6, as listed, important benefits and advantages of leveraging cloud through AWS. One is when you talk about trading capital expenses for operating expenses, you're talking about what you just mentioned, replacing the large upfront investment on fixed assets such as buildings, security or hardware, and with variable expenses, where since we are using what you call a pay-as-you-go pricing model, customers like yourselves or the organizations that you serve only pay for actual usage of computing resources. What therefore also that means is, for you from a budgeting perspective, it means we take away the headache of having to pay large upfront costs that then meant that until you had these budgets approved and the funds in advance, you then could not really take on any of the projects that you needed to. Second, when you talk about economies of scale, we are talking about the benefit of managing, because as AWS, we are talking about managing hundreds of thousands of cloud infrastructure. AWS is therefore able to achieve highest economies of scale, and this, from what we call our pricing philosophy, is translated into lower costs as more and more customers adopt the various services. And this is not just something that we say to actually sound good, it's something that we back up. And since we launched in 2006, and this is also available online, you can see that we have proactively reduced the various prices 107 times. You're not going to find much of that going on anywhere else. What that means is, as more customers adopt a service, and more economies of scale are achieved through that service, we extend this price benefit to the customers in terms of actual price reduction. Thirdly, we talk about, as we refer to, stop guessing the capacity. You actually decide, you actually take up, you end up dealing, so that you avoid the issue of ending up with limited capacity or managing expensive resources that are not being utilized. In fact, statistically, you'll find that most data centers are optimized for between 15 to 20% globally, meaning at any one time for almost on-prem organizations, you're talking about 80% of capacity that is idle most of the time. And that's in a time when everyone is trying to do more with less, I'm sure you do not want to be that kind of organization. And therefore, with our services, we talk about scaling automatically to meet your organization's needs. And when I think about research or educational institutions, you will obviously need increased capacity. For example, at term ends, or when you talk about for your, maybe if I think about institutions of higher learning, when you have exams and you have a lot more people logging in, or at admission times, you will use different capacity at that time compared to much later on when the semester is a bit more stable. And then this refers to the kind of scalability. When you need more, you get and pay for more. When you need less, you get and pay for exactly that less. When it comes to speed and agility in the cloud computing environment, we're referring to cloud resources which are just a click away, which means that as a business or organization, it reduces the amount of time it takes for you and your resources to be able to set up what you need to. And therefore, whether you want to test as a research organization or you want to develop and deploy new applications, you're able to really do this in a matter of minutes as opposed to days, weeks, or even months. And then we talked about, we referred to in terms of being able to increase your speed and agility. And then we also talk about focusing for you on what really matters. And in this case, we're talking about focusing on your students. And what then that means is your mission at the end of the day is either going to be focused around education or research. And therefore, it means that you're able to focus on the projects that differentiate your organization and not on the infrastructure. Or to use slightly more technical terms, you're able to focus on things not just about keeping the lights on, but the mission of the organization. Cloud computing allows you to do that. And lastly, when you think about going global in minutes, we're talking about an infrastructure for us that is the most secure, most expensive, and reliable cloud platform. We have 26 geographic regions and 84 availability zones across the world. And what that means is it allows organizations like yourself to deploy their cloud infrastructure globally within minutes and to be able to deliver services closer to their culture. And that then brings the topic of, we kept talking about AWS at a global level, what we're able to do. Someone might ask on the call or might be curious, what about in Africa? What is AWS doing in Africa? And we're proud to say that we have a long history in Africa, having first established a presence in Cape Town through a development center set up in 2004. And you will see as we go along, around 2010, customer service opened the operations in Cape Town, and today employs thousands of individuals. Further down, we expanded our presence by opening the Johannesburg office in 2015. And then in 2018, additional infrastructure came down and we were able to put what we call the cloud front locations in Johannesburg and Cape Town, followed by an edge location, as you will note, that was then launched in Nairobi in 2019. And then at the beginning, at the onset of COVID, for those that maybe may remember, in April 2020, we as AWS launched the first region, the first AWS region in Africa, when we launched the region in Cape Town in South Africa. And any AWS infrastructure region meets the highest level of security or compliance and data protection laws. And we did not really stop there, because later on the same year, as COVID was really getting accelerated, Amazon added 3,000 permanent and seasonal full-time jobs in the South African economy, bringing at that time the total permanent workforce in South Africa to about 7,000. And then further, late last year, the infrastructure plan for the continent has not slowed down. Late last year, we announced additional infrastructure that will be rolled out starting from this year. We're going to have what we refer to as local zones in both Johannesburg and Nairobi. And then we are also launching outposts in Nigeria, just to continue enhancing that customer experience as they go about with the cloud computing. What does this really mean? You will see that Africa remains super strategic for us, and therefore the AWS African investment or the Amazon African investment, whether you think about people, whether you think about infrastructure, or whether you think about setup, is expected to continue growing and just continuing to represent the strategic value that Africa represents to us as an organization. As I go towards concluding, then I just want to answer a question that maybe someone may be saying, well, cloud computing sounds interesting, AWS sounds interesting, but what really differentiates one cloud from the other? What sets AWS apart? And I'll conclude with just really 6 areas very briefly. Number one, our former CEO liked to say that there is no algorithm for compressing experience. And it means that having spent time, when you have been in the business for over 15 years, well ahead of any other provider, it means that we've been building and refining our services since 2006. And then what that means is based on customer feedback, partner feedback, and based also on our continuous research, our services are much more mature than any other platform. And our portfolio continues to scale. Secondly, we talk about service breadth and depth. Having continually expanded our services to support virtually any cloud workload, it also means that we have, as listed, more than 200 services that range from, like we said, compute, storage, networking, database, analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, you said, to just continue enhancing the experience of our customers and our partners. Our paces of innovation, we've been innovating on the cloud, like I said, since 2006, and are at present the world's most comprehensively and broadly adopted cloud platform, offering over the number of services that you see there. And then this is enhanced by our global footprint. So we have the broadest set of services, but we also will see that from an infrastructure perspective, we have the largest global infrastructure of any provider. And that footprint even just thinking about what we announced last year, the end of last year, that's continued to grow in Africa, is continuing to grow significantly as we go into the new year. I did mention our pricing philosophy that speaks to the ability to continue giving our customers flexibility, the transparency of pricing, and passing on cost reductions as we continue building economies of scale based on the adoption of our services. And then lastly, we have our very well-developed partner ecosystem. This includes system integrators, technology partners, consulting partners, and our marketplaces that allow us to be able to enable and support our customers' mission, meaning that whichever part of the world you're in, we have a very well-enabled partner ecosystem that allows you to experience the beauty and the agility and also the disruptive nature of cloud computing. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll now hand over to my colleague, Jabu, who will then take us through the next few minutes. Over to you, Jabu.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for the introduction, Alex. So just continuing on the discussion around the breadth of our services. So when we talk about the breadth of our services and how broad they are, so we are talking about you being able to virtually support any type of workload that you can imagine. So just looking at these services bottom up. So Robin already spoken about our core infrastructure, which are regions. So some of those services enable you to be able to run your compute. So when you think about compute, when you do virtual machines, those are the compute core services. Storage is also one of our core offering on AWS, providing you a range of storage type of services. I will dive deeper as I go along. But we also do provide you networking. So what it means by networking is when you go to AWS, you are able to create your virtual segregated environment, which we call it VPC, which is your virtual private cloud, allowing you to be able to segregate the network similar to what you do today on your on-prem. So if you imagine creating of subnets for your environment, setting up what needs to be publicly accessible. So we provide those services under networking. I spoke about the infrastructure, but most importantly, because we rate security as a very high priority on AWS. So we have specific offerings around the security and compliance. So under the compliance, for instance, if there is an education institutions that have to take credit cards, for instance, there are strict rules around payment card industry, how you manage the data around payment or accepting payments from your applications. We will help you to be able to meet the compliance for that as well. Management tools, here we're talking about, should you want to manage your cost on AWS, we will then provide you with a number of tools, allowing you to be able to manage your expenditure, to manage your resources on how your resources are accessed within the AWS. So if I move right, Robin mentioned the breadth of our services there. So we have, when we talk about virtual machines, okay, before you move forward, when we talk about virtual machines, we have over 400 compute instances. So imagine the type of workload you can be able to run on over 400 instances. So this allows you, if you are running a very small workload, you are able to find a specific instance that can support your applications. So we are able to innovate so fast around our computing instances because AWS took a decision to really invest heavily by actually creating their own chips. So this allows us to be really create specific instances depending on the workload that the customer runs on AWS. So if I move up there, you would see the type of applications that you can be able to run or the type of solutions that you can be able to run on AWS. This is ranging from application development, analytics, media, mobile, databases. So if you imagine databases, as an institutions might be running different type of database engines, like your MySQL, your Oracle, your Progress SQL. So all those open source and enterprise, formerly enterprise databases, you will be able to find on AWS. Internet of Things, application integration. So there's a merit of service that allows you to be able to integrate applications. So this allows you to be able to have that gradual move to AWS as well. So you are able to still run some of your workloads on premise, whilst you are able to integrate as you gradually move to the cloud. So the integration service talks to that as well. So Robin did already mention that we have a fully featured platform with over 200 services